Hello, I'm Casey Aiken, and this is 21 This Week. Coming up next, Montgomery County School Board to Josh Starr. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. The Rockville City Council continues its attack on business. What was the significance of Governor Hogan's first contract rejection? And so far, Maryland is measles-free. Stay tuned. Our panel of insiders will give you the story behind the story. We're joined by the former Majority Leader of the Maryland House of Delegates, John Hurson. Attorney and former Republican candidate for county executive, Jim Shalleck. Education activist, Cynthia Rubenstein, and Democratic political strategist, Susan Heltemes. Stay tuned for these stories and more on the next 21 This Week. For more than a month, Montgomery County residents have witnessed the public debate of whether Montgomery County School Board would renew MCPS Superintendent Josh Starr and give him a new contract. This messy debate, which played out in the news media, came to an end when Mr. Starr abruptly resigned in a perfect Johnny Paycheck moment and told the school board they can take this job and shove it. Cynthia, when Starr was hired, it was thought he would create a more collaborative relationship with the school board than his predecessor, Jerry Wiest. So what happened?
Well, you know, we really don't know, because the four members of the school board that did not support or would not have supported his contract renewal aren't talking. Nobody's really talking. There's a lot of conjecture about school board members thinking he wasn't approaching the achievement gap correctly and making it an urgent issue, that they were offended that he was interested in the school chancellor job in New York City, that he seemed to have more of a looking for more of a national profile than paying attention to Montgomery County public schools. But we really don't know, because nobody's talking.
Susan, we're going to have the same question to you. Why did the school board have the reservation about his contract? Was it just personality? I mean, certainly Jerry Wiest had a national profile. What's going on here?
No, he didn't have the kind of profile that Starr was building up to. And what's interesting is the school board absolutely is not talking, because I've reached out to a couple of them and they said, no, we're not talking about this, off the record, nothing. And the other thing that I keep hearing is that the school board felt their relationship with him wasn't like they wanted. And there are some who say that he was taking, the leadership was coming from below and he was letting principals do things that they hadn't done before. And then there's that vision thing, as George W. Bush used to say, the vision thing. And the school board has supposedly upset with him because he didn't actually carry out their vision. Now, one has to have a vision for someone to carry out. And there are those who say that perhaps the school board should take part of this responsibility because their lack of vision, perhaps.
Yeah, and I would just jump in here and say, I mean, don't they have an obligation to explain their reasoning here? I mean, this is a huge school system. It's one of the most important assets to this county. They have an obligation to explain their reasoning. And I realize it's not an election period, but even so, they have an obligation to talk about this.
John, the budget for the Montgomery County Public School System is 55% of the Montgomery County budget. You are absolutely right. They need to do some explaining here.
Well,
Jim.
Casey, recently there's been 3 public issues where he appeared to be weak and indecisive. The school start times, you know, he was all over the place about kids sleeping later or not. No decisiveness. Recently there's been a number of cases where employees of the system have been charged with sex abuse and crimes against children, and there hasn't seemed to be a decisive action from him. And then, you know, his personality, I think, had a lot to do with it.
You know, even that, Jim, is perfect. Those are great talking points. If that's what the school board wants to bring out and those are the issues, they have an obligation to do that to the county.
You know what? The average superintendent in the United States only lasts something like
3+ years.
3.7 years or something. Yeah. And Jerry Wiest was here for 12 years. And under state law, they had to give him a 4-year contract. And there are those on the inside who said if he could have gotten just a 2-year contract, a 2-year extension, he might have gotten
That's
that.
probably not a good
But
idea.
one more thing. If, number one, if Shirley Brandman had not left the school board, and if the school board election had gone differently, Josh Starr would probably still be here. Because he would have, I'm pretty reasonably sure that he would have had 5 votes
Well,
for
and two
a
of the people
4-year
who were
extension.
against him, Jill Faust Ortman and Rebecca Smondrowski, were not school board candidates. So you're absolutely right. And the teachers liked him. I believe the teachers liked them.
Jim,
But
why don't you
also-
wrap it up?
Yeah,
We're
the
good.
third issue I was going to talk about is the weather closings. He took some heat on when schools should be closed. So there was an indecisive
Look, this is
image of this
an
guy.
impossible job.
It is.
You can't satisfy the parents on the closings. You can't satisfy the parents on when the little darlings get up and go to school in the morning.
But he looked indecisive.
Oh,
And it's interesting to
Susan,
note that Ike Leggett did not want him to go.
all right, Susan, you got the last word on that? Because we're going to go to a topic that, this is the third time that I brought it up because I'm so exercised about it. To all observers, the Rockville City Council seems to be having an identity crisis. Well, maybe not to all observers, but certainly to me. And it's over whether to become Tacoma Park or Bethesda. In a 3-2 vote, Mayor Bridget Donald Newton and council members Burl Feinberg and Virginia Olney passed a zoning text amendment that would prevent the Sienna Corporation of Columbia from developing a vacant, rundown, bankrupt industrial warehouse. Jim Shalleck. Sienna bought this property out of bankruptcy. They have spent $1 million studying the property. They have tried to develop it, and their planned use of self-storage has been a permitted use under the zoning law since the 1950s. So what motivated the Rockville City Council to do this backdoor text amendment?
The only excuse I can think of is a political one. There's got to be some political maneuvering or something behind this vote, because it doesn't make any sense. And one of the permitted uses is the self-storage. It's a dilapidated area. It only benefits the city, brings in more revenue. I can't understand it. So the only explanation I can see is there's something political that we don't know.
Susan, I know you're dying to answer this, but I'm going to go to John first. John, the economic growth in the county is anemic. So why would the Rockville City Council make such an action?
A couple of points. I'm not sure I agree with the anemic thing that you're saying, that we're in terrible shape. I mean,
Have you seen the vacancy rates for industrial space?
I'm just saying,
in
not
Montgomery-
as
in
bad
Mon-
as in Virginia,
Montgomery
though.
County?
I'm just saying, generally speaking, I don't think Montgomery County is,
The commercial real
like
estate
10%
market,
unemployment or anything
the commercial
like that,
real
so.
estate market in Montgomery County
Okay.
is soft.
I think
beyond belief.
I think there's lots of measurements of that, Casey. I wouldn't say the entire economic climate of Montgomery County is anemic. But that's not my big point. My big point here is that I think you have a point. And that is not so much about this particular development that they didn't allow, but I've also seen some other things that the Rockville City Council is doing related to adequate facilities for development. They're trying to sort of take over a role that the county has in projecting growth elements in terms of school capacity. It's not their job. You know, when you become an elected official, you have to sort of decide which level of government you want to play in. And, you know, you either become a local city council person or a county person or a state person, and they're trying to play bigger roles than they should.
Well,
and that's a real problem.
I want to go to Susan, but the one thing you have to note, this project was permissible under current zoning. What they did was they targeted for non-development. It's not that they didn't block it; they targeted for non-development.
I hear what you're saying. I mean, I agree with that.
And Susan, I want to this point, both the professional staff of the Rockville Planning Board plus the Planning Board itself discourage the council from trying to make this text amendment and take this vote. Now, what is your point in
Well,
support of it?
I'm not saying I'm supportive, but what I am saying is that is their prerogative, and that and when you are a leader, you have to make tough decisions. And their thinking is that you do not want a storage facility next to an elementary school. However,
it's so specious.
Casey, I've said this before. I think it is totally wrong, and you too, Jim. You can't assume that there's some political diabolical move behind it.
We got to wrap this up and go to break. But let me just tell you, if you're a citizen of Rockville, let me just tell you what's going to happen. The Sienna Corporation is going to sue the mayor and the city council over this, and they're going to lose. So the millions of dollars that is being lost in tax revenue and the millions of dollars that are going to be spent defending this nonsense is on the head of the mayor and Burl Feinberg for bringing this thing up. When we come back from this short break, what's the significance of Governor Hogan's first contract rejection, and why is Maryland measles free? And welcome back. As expected, the first couple of weeks of the General Assembly has all been about Republican Governor Larry Hogan and his approach to spending. It was initially feared that Hogan, who campaigned on a platform of fiscal responsibility and cutting taxes, would take a meat cleaver axe to the Maryland state budget. Yet his initial budget, submitted the day after he was inaugurated, was on the surface more restrained. A cut here, a cut there, a little nip, a little tuck. But then it became clear that the out-year effect of Hogan's plan had very significant consequences. John, this week Governor Hogan and Comptroller Peter Franchot voted against endorsing an emergency contract issued by former Governor Martin O'Malley. Is this an indication that he has a different approach to budgeting, or is this just some political nonsense?
This is the kabuki dance as they all get to know each other down in Annapolis. And I actually agree with you that I thought his initial budget was actually was welcomed, given what he could have done. And though there are out-year consequences to that budget, I mean, there's always out-year consequences to the budget. So his budget, the thing that Bobby Neal put together, frankly, was actually a very good document. What happened in the Board of Public Works, now, you talk about rejecting the contracts, I'm not sure your audience understands that. There's a body down in Annapolis of 3 people, the treasurer, the governor, and the comptroller. Two of those are Democrats
from Montgomery
from
County?
Montgomery County. So it's Peter Franchot and Nancy Kopp, thank you, who are from Montgomery County, and then the new governor. And what happened was Peter Franchot teamed up with the governor to be the conservative. And it's going to be very interesting to watch what happens in the Board of Public Works. Peter Franchot was going to run for governor, but he decided not to. But when he was going to run for governor, he was running to the right, trying to be conservative. And he still sounds those themes when we see him in public. So it's going to be very interesting, the dynamic on the Board of Public Works, that one body that gets to approve contracts that are given out to private firms.
He'll be like Justice Stevens.
That's right.
The Board of Public Works.
So Jim, in addition to sending this signal that there's a new sheriff in town, Hogan has proposed tax relief areas in several areas: small businesses, for motorists, retirees, and stormwater management. Are any of these proposals going to pass the General Assembly?
I would say the one dealing with retirees. He wants to cut taxes for military retirees, police, fire, first responders. I think that's going to have a bipartisan attraction because you're dealing with men and women who are putting their lives on the line every day. So I think that may go through first. The other 3, I think the Democrats are going to fight.
Well, it's interesting that, in the opening read and in John's comments about the initial budget, there certainly has been some backlash in the last week about the outlying years, and as more and more people are seeing that they might not be getting all the money that they want. This afternoon, the Senate decided that they would take a symbolic action and put the nominations for Governor Hogan's secretary cabinets on hold for a week.
That's Jamie Raskin from District 20. I think that what's interesting, and some of the Democrats were taken aback by the fact that his State of the State address was very political. It sounded like a campaign speech, and I think that some of the leaders were offended by that. And he brought up the same things he said. And one of the things that I think the legislature will fight him on is the rain tax. As Rich Madaleno said, it's a federal mandate. If you don't have the state involved, it's going to dump back to the counties. And we have to pay for it. So where is it going to go? So there is going to be kickback, and Jamie Raskin, as the chair in the Senate of the committee that approves his nominees, took the first step today.
It's just been great to see all the maneuvering that's going along. It's going to be fun for the next 60 or 80 days, whatever remains in the session. All right, our last topic. The Disneyland measles outbreak has been getting a lot of attention lately and sparking a debate over the anti-vaccination movement. Measles that can be easily communicated and can be deadly can be prevented very easily by vaccination. Here in Maryland, we have thus far remained measles-free, although it seems every day there's a new headline about some other place in the country that has developed some measles strain. Cynthia, Maryland and Montgomery County have very stringent requirements for vaccination of school children, and as a result, many of these communicable diseases have been under control. Why is the anti-vax movement at play here?
There was a long ago study done in Britain that tied measles vaccines to autism. That study was thoroughly debunked. There's no scientific basis to it, but somehow that study lives on in the minds of some anti-vaccine activists. There are pockets of them in California. In fact, California has more pockets of them than other places in the United States, and that's one of the reasons that California is experiencing this measles outbreak. But vaccination rates in Maryland and Montgomery County are very, very, very high, and most parents comply to a great degree, even though there is a proviso in regulations that does allow for religious reasons not to be vaccinated. But still, 99% of people have their kids vaccinated.
So, Susan, do you agree that this is a good idea for public safety, that all school-age children and frankly adults should be vaccinated?
Absolutely. This last week, the CDC, NIH, everybody came to the Hill and said, yes, do it. And one of the leading anti-vaccination people was Jenny McCarthy, whatever she is, an actress, whatever. And she's admitted, she just said recently, well, I think I was misinterpreted. But the bottom line is, Cynthia alluded to this report, and what's come out is, the person who wrote the report said he was a doctor. There's a question whether he really was a doctor. If he was a doctor, he's defrocked. And he actually got paid by a company to write the report that all this came from. He also wrote 3 little books. And Dr. Nancy Snyderman, who is the NBC health person, said, this shows us that if we become lax, what is the next thing that's going to come back is polio. Tens of thousands of people die in other parts of the world where we don't do this. And those parents who have children, for instance, who are compromised and can't get shots said, this isn't fair to us either. It is a public health issue, and there is even talk now on Capitol Hill, even with the Republicans on top, that this needs to be done. And there are libertarians, but this is one point where they said libertarianism has nothing to do with it.
What I find, in my just sort of casual observation of the anti-vaccination movement, is that it's some very progressive parents who want to protect their children and that are not getting their children vaccinated.
There was a story that we've probably all read about by parents who don't like the fact that all 3 vaccinations may come in one shot. And so some parents have gone so far as to go to a pharmacist, break them out, go to their doctor, and this, of course, is not paid for by the insurance, but get to one at a time. There may be things that we can look at, but at the moment, all the medical heads in this country who are the experts say there's no connection, get over it, it is a public safety issue.
Jim?
No, I think Susan's right. I think legislatures are going to move in the direction of making this mandatory and making this stricter, because this dialogue is healthy, I think. It's good. But I think the legislatures, and it's going to be bipartisan, are going to move in the direction of really mandating this stuff.
And there's another
with very
factor
few
here.
exceptions.
There's another factor here, and that's pediatricians. Pediatricians have to be better at educating parents about vaccinations and the effectiveness and the protection not only for their children but for other children. So
even in their waiting rooms.
Even in their waiting rooms. There are practices that are telling patients that if you do not vaccinate your children, you will not be our patients. And they're giving them a time to comply, and if they don't, then they will not be patients, because they are worried about the communicability, however you say that word, that big word, of measles and other diseases.
And it is that way
Well,
because
I think that's
when I had it, I remember it went through school like that. So it can spread quickly, and we don't want it.
Well, thank you, Susan, and thank you, panel. When we come back from the short break, parting shots.
That's right.
And welcome back. Thank you, Susan. I want to give my parting shot to the Washington Redskins and the Armed Services Entertainment Corporation, who over this past 2 weeks have sent out 5 different groups of Washington Redskins cheerleaders and NFL players to entertain American service troops overseas. One of those groups was included my daughter, Krista, who just came back from Iraq, Kuwait, and Qatar. And her description of what our troops are going through in the 2 weeks that she spent in Iraq was kind of shocking. It was an eye-opening experience for her. She said it's very rough conditions, and these guys are brave beyond belief. So I want to thank not only the Washington Redskins and all these fine young women who do this, but the NFL for sponsoring this on behalf of our troops. Susan, your parting shot.
As a response to the Citizens United ruling in Congress, Chris Van Hollen and John Sarbanes have both introduced reforms, as in the state, Senator Jamie Raskin and Delegate Al Carr. And this came about because of the spending from the 2014 elections. And I want to make certain I get this right. The 100 biggest contributors to elections in this past election cycle spent $323 million more, and that doesn't include more money we don't know about, than the 4.75 million people who gave $250 or less. We need reform. Kudos to these 4 gentlemen for taking it on.
Thank you, Susan. Cynthia, your parting shot.
Okay, my parting shot is about numbers as well, but it's about college graduation rates. In 1970, students from the lowest income families graduated from college at a rate of 6%. Now they graduate at a rate of 9%. The wealthiest children from the wealthiest families graduated at 44% in 1970. They graduate at the rate of 77% now. We have a lot of work to do to ensure that students from low-income families are able to graduate from college.
Thank you, Cynthia. Jim Shalleck, your parting shot.
Well, Casey, recently there was a shooting at a high school in Frederick, and it just reminds me of the safety issues I'm always concerned about. A bill was just introduced in the legislature to have a uniform police presence at every school in the state. It's a serious bill, and it should begin a dialogue. We may not be able to afford it at first, but we got to go in the direction of keeping our kids safe. In this world, I think we're a little bit too complacent about the school safety, and I think this bill is very serious and should get the attention it needs.
Thank you, Jim. And John Hurson, your parting shot.
I guess mine's about numbers too. It's 10 years since the Strathmore Arts Center has opened. Congratulations to them, but a shout out to, I guess, all the planning that was done, what Doug Duncan did, what the council did back then to make this thing happen, get the state money to build it. We often don't thank people for the service that they've given, and a lot of people planned that and made it happen, and I want to say thank you to them.
Thank you, John. Well, I'm going to pick up on one little thing as we close about Cynthia and mentioned about college graduation. Our colleges cost too much. And the edifices that the public school system have built to themselves is a tremendous problem. We need to reduce the cost of colleges so that everyone has an opportunity to go, and technology is going to be the way we do it. So I want to end on that note. I want to thank the panel for being here. Thank the audience for tuning in each and every week to Montgomery County's hardest hitting political talk show. And remember, for continuing coverage with all the local political discussion, you can follow us on social media like Facebook, which I'm bad at, and Twitter, which I'm worse at. For 21 This Week, I'm Casey Aiken.